temos falado das carreiras espaciais, que tanta atenção centrou, quer aqui neste estúdio nave, como certamente aí em casa ou no escritório, onde quer que nos esteja a acompanhar. O que é certo é que esta emissão, através do sistema online, via streaming, tem captado cada vez mais gente. Daí que esta cimeira aeronáutica, este Portugal Air Summit, esteja a ser cada vez mais abrangente, até porque consegue chegar a todo lado, a vários países, por esse mundo fora, por essa Europa fora, e acaba por atravessar vários continentes, obviamente, porque este é um setor, uma matéria transversal que interessa a todos, certamente, e quando se fala de carreiras espaciais, bom, e falando então de jovens que encheram este estúdio nave, bom, aí são muitos os que têm muitas expectativas. Conforme ouvimos, são muitos os que provavelmente vão optar por vários cursos ligados à engenharia para conseguirem prosseguir esse sonho de ser astronautas ou terem atividades relacionadas com a área espacial, embora saibamos as muitas dificuldades que existem. Mas Portugal tem aqui alguma palavra a dizer e mais logo noutras conferências, noutros debates, vamos ter a oportunidade de debater isso mesmo, porque Portugal pode ter aqui uma palavra a dizer, até tendo em conta a sua situação geográfica. O que é que Portugal poderá fazer, o que é que poderá ganhar e oferecer em todo este sistema espacial, e aqui obviamente que a agência espacial, quer portuguesa, quer europeia, pode ter realmente um papel preponderante e determinante em toda esta área. E agora falamos de mobilidade aérea avançada. E o que é? É movimentar pessoas e cargas entre locais de forma mais eficiente. Pode parecer aqui, de algum modo, uma coisa muito fácil, mas poderá ser complicada. E falemos, por exemplo, dos drones. Dos drones que podem ser usados para serviços como movimentação de cargas ou produtos farmacêuticos e estão em fase final de aprovação em Portugal. Mobilidade aérea avançada, espaço e Vertiports é o tema. Vai estar aqui em debate neste estúdio nave e chamo ao palco Verusca Maza Rodrigues Dias, consultora Drones and Advanced Air Mobility, que vai também moderar este debate. Verusca, muito bom dia, bem-vinda. Pode, por favor, sentar-se no lugar também do moderador. Mark Cohen, diretor de vendas Unifly. Hello, good morning. How are you? Welcome to this Portugal Air Summit. Are you enjoying? Great. Vamos também ter Eduardo Mendes, CEO do Connect Robotics. Olá, muito bom dia. Pronto para falar de mobilidade? Vamos a isso. Vai estar também, mas online, Clem Newton-Brown, da CEO Skyports, que julgo que estará prestes aqui a entrar online. Não sei se me conseguirá ouvir. Clem, are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. Temos também aqui a Borna, espero não me enganar do nome, porque é muito complicado, ele já se ri. Bordolhac. Great. It was a nice accent. Perfect. Ok, great. Estou aprovada. Que é da Vertical Aerospace. E, meus senhores, vamos começar a falar então de mobilidade aérea avançada. Bom trabalho. Muito obrigado.
Can you hear me? I would like to start with Eduardo, talking about the advanced air mobility environment and the logistical operations with drones. Tell us a little bit about the history of connected robotics, and then I would like to ask you and know your opinion about the current European regulation or base for drone operations. Is there the necessary balance between safety and economic feasibility, in your opinion?
Thank you, Verusca. It's a pleasure to be here. We are a Portuguese startup. It's good to be here in Portugal talking about that. We started in 2014 as a spin-off of Porto University. We started our first beyond line of sight deliveries That's really hard to get. In December of 2016, actually in the same week of Amazon. So Amazon spent a few millions more than us to do that. But here in Portugal, in 2016, we were doing beyond line of sight drone deliveries. At that time, doing deliveries of food from a charity to elderly people in the mountains. Then we did some operations with the postal services here in Portugal, even in Lisbon, beyond line of sight delivery in the capital, Lisbon, with the postal service. And in 2017, we got more traction from the health sector, and that makes more sense. And since then, we are more focused on that area. And I can explain why. I don't know if you know that, but in a heart or a lung can take 4 hours to be transplanted after death of the donor. But after someone is dead on the hospital, they need to take blood, take it for the transplantation institute to analyze that blood. Imagine that can take 1 hour with traffic. And then 1 more hour to make the analysis of blood to find someone that's compatible with that organ. And then they will call, stop everything, where are you? Let's go, send you to the next hospital, and I will send you the organ there. And we have 2 hours to get there, maybe more, 1 hour of traffic, then 1 hour to cut the person open and change the heart. And that's very difficult to do. And actually, most of organs are just not usable, and the biggest percentage is lost because of that. So we have a lot of impact. Imagine that in the first stage, we can just transport the blood sample. That hour goes to 5 minutes. Then in the second stage, we transplant the organ. Instead of 1 hour, more 5 minutes. Then in the third stage, we go with a bigger drone to carry that person. Then we change the balance, and we will increase the number of persons saved by that. And there is a lot of other use cases. So we were operating, flying beyond on line of sight, until December 2020. All was decided by ANAC, the local regulator. Then there is a change on European level and harmonized regulation. What I think is a very good thing, because one authorization here in Portugal means we can fly everywhere in Europe with the same documentation, the same procedures. What is a good thing? The problem is EASA is learning, and their learning process is very slow and very expensive for us. I think we are getting in a good position. We have the SORA documentation, the specific operations risk assessment, and that's a good thing. The European is leading that because it's very structured, says exactly what is needed. Is a very good thing. We are moving from a technology company to a aerial transportation company, high level of standards, high level of procedures. That's a good thing. We are improvement. We are getting better. We are getting on an area, aviation, that's very safe, very structured. So that's a good thing. The problem and what it's come is the cost for that. The cost, one-sided to do that. For example, there is design verification now. That's again a very good thing, because you can show that they have defined what you need to show, how to prove some part of the system is good, is working good. We are working on that, and I believe in less than 3 months we get authorization and can fly again and return our contracts. That's a very good thing. Let's hope they don't change anything and create a new design verification and stop everything again. But I think we are close to that, and that's a very good thing. These procedures are in place now. For example, the design verification with EASA, they charge 250 euros hour to make this analysis. So a lot of few thousand, so they can learn also. And would be better if they don't charge anything, because they are also learning and preparing the documentation. We'll have more participation from the industry, from the SMEs, because who are doing this mostly are small companies, startups starting. Otherwise, we'll be just big companies just monopolizing everything again. So it would be smart to remove these barriers so more people can participate. But I think we are getting there. We are getting closer. There is a lot of work about the level of requirements, and that's also the problem. We have a big leap. The open category, almost anyone can get a big drone and fly, no security at all. But we are a very secure company with strong procedures, strong technology, and we have way more problems than someone that goes on the market and just fly around. Who goes to the market and buy a drone can fly in a very unsafe area with really unsafe procedures, and we cannot fly and save lives in a structured way. So there is to be some changes on that, on the safety requirements, and maybe not change the safety requirements, but how it's doing. For example, allowing us to fly while instead of no one can fly, let's learn, and in the future you can fly now. Let's learn together, fly together with low risk in the rural areas, for example. Let's fly, let's learn, so step by step. So I think that needs to change, but otherwise I think the procedures are very good. We are going on a harmonized way. I think that's the way to go.
Thank you, Eduardo. Now, after this side of the advanced air mobility, Eduardo is an operator. I want to talk about U-Space, about the management of the airspace, where the drones and also eVTOLs will fly together, and they will be included also in one environment where we already have manned aviation on the future. So now I invite Mark to comment a little bit and talk about U-Space. We know the start of the implementation in Europe is scheduled for next year. So how do you see the evolution in the next 5 years, and how does Unifly fit into this context?
Thank you, Veruska, for this easy question. And thank you for inviting me and being here. I think Unifly has been one of the pioneers within the UTM space. If somebody talked about 5 years ago and talked to us that we would have U-Space right now, we would have been laughing. So giving a perspective of what will happen in the next 5 years is not an easy thing. We do see we are involved in a number of countries that are currently implementing U-Space. There are a couple of countries that want to be ready by January 23 when U-Space comes into place. We also see that some other countries are in the process of getting to the implementation, but are looking more to the end of next year. And then a number of countries that still are getting their heads around how they want to implement U-Space. So I think in the next year we will see a number of implementations where people will start using the U-Space regulation and learn from it. There will be some other countries that will look at those early adopters of U-Space and see how they evolve, how they are going to implement U-Space. Because in the countries we are having discussions with, let's say the vision of U-Space is the same but still a little bit different. We even have one country that says, well, if you look at the regulation, it says you might implement U-Space, you're not obliged to. And they're saying, especially in the first year, we are going to manage our airspace and won't be implementing U-Spaces. Some other countries are implementing U-Space within the control zones, and some others are looking at the broader implementation of U-Spaces in their country. So I think in the first 2 to 3 years, it will be a lot of learning about how will this U-Space work, making sure that we give the proper feedback to the local and the national authorities and also to EASA, and that we start adapting U-Space in the next 2 to 3 years and come up to a point where within 4 to 5 years we have a lot of automation in the approvals, because right now there is automation for the flight authorization, although some of the countries are kind of tweaking that a little bit and still have within U-Space a manual authorization in some cases, which is not 100% in line with U-Space, but still being accepted by EASA for the moment and see how this evolves. But I do think there are two important things I think within the next 5 years that will need to happen is that we'll need a lot of more automation on the authorization process, and not only looking at the flight authorization but also at the operational operational authorization, because I think that's something a lot of people are overseeing right now. In U-Space, yes, you've got the automated flight authorization, but still before you get there you need to have your operational authorization, and that can take in some countries up into a couple of months to a year or longer than a year. So that's something we need to sort out to be able to have an industry and facilitate the drone operators. And then the other thing I think that we need to solve is the integration of the manned aviation with the drones, and not so much the commercial airliners, because they're flying high enough not to pose a threat to drones, or drones posing a threat to the commercial airliners. And also if you look at the airports, it's heavily regulated, but it's more about the general aviation, who in a number of countries don't have the obligation to show where they are. They can fly without a transponder, so you don't know where they're flying, and I think drones pose a big risk to that use of the airspace and the other way around. So that's definitely something we need to fix in the next 2 to 3 years, so that we can actually have a real drone industry and drones flying around integrated within 5 years. I don't think it's so much of an issue right now, because if you look around, you don't see a lot of drones flying. 5 years ago, we thought we would have issues with noise pollution and light pollution of drones flying around, and air taxis flying without a pilot. I haven't seen that happening yet. I think the most drones I saw flying in real life was when I was at Tomorrowland. There were 4 drones monitoring the people, and you had 2 helicopters from the police circling around. So that was an example that it can work. But before we really have the industry can take off, we need to sort out automation, and not only on the flight authorization, but on the operational organization. So that won't take as long as it does right now, and that we can have a safe integration within the general aviation and the drones in lower airspace.
Okay, thank you, Mark. This panel also covers another important aspect of advanced air mobility, which is ground infrastructures. We know the most famous one, the name is Vertiport, and now I want to invite Clem, who is CEO of Skyports. Clem, please, we know the specifications for the design of Vertiports have recently been published by EASA and also by FAA, and both are different in many ways. So I would like to ask you to comment on this misalignment, let's say like this, between regulators, and how companies like Skyports are affected by this decision. And finally, please, your opinion about the biggest challenges in infrastructures for next 5 years.
Sure, thank you, Veruska, and thank you very much for having me here. I'm calling in from Melbourne, Australia. I run a business called Skyports, which is a vertiport company which is perhaps a little different to my competitors globally, in that we put a very large focus on access to the property sites, as well as developing the actual vertiports. But the vertiport operations, I think, are still in limbo, and your question really goes to that. And I think the misalignment between various regulators having a stab at trying to set out standards and regulations, it's inevitable, because we don't actually have any aircraft commercially flying yet. So this chicken and egg problem we have is that we're all wanting to get started with building out vertiport networks, but the aircraft are not yet operational. So what we've got is 300 plus aircraft in development. There's about a dozen or so that are the front runners, I suppose, that have had significant funds raised in the last year or so, and it's clear that they will they will get through to operations. And the success of the aircraft and being able to fulfill their potential is very much dependent on being able to operate in ways that are different to helicopters. So we're looking for vertiports where they can go to new locations. But all these aircraft are very different. You've got multi-rotor, you've got tilt rotor, you've got lift and thrust, and then you've got different types of propulsion. Some of them are electric, some of them are hybrid, some of them are hydrogen. And there's just so many uncertainties in what the aircraft are going to be, and there'll probably be a range of aircraft, although I imagine there will be a standard that develops. And I think the lift and thrust seems to be the predominant design that's dominating now. But ultimately, that's the difficulty with vertiports and the rules and regulations, is we don't actually have a standard aircraft or series of aircrafts to operate from. So very much the regulators are flying blind to a large extent, and I know our regulator here in Australia, CASA, is also watching very closely what the EASA and FAA are doing, and both those organisations, as you've mentioned, have had a go at some draft regulations and guidelines. But they are draft, and I think everybody recognises that they may change, and I think they're also very conservative because of the different range of aircraft. That they really have to be basing them on the worst case scenario, I suppose. So while a lot of us were thinking that the vertiports would be significantly smaller than the helipads, we've actually found that that's actually not the case, and that it's a very conservative set of guidelines, which I think we will find, if the aircraft prove to be more manoeuvrable, able to be operated in tighter locations than heliports, then I think we will see amendments to enable more density of locations for vertiports, and perhaps different operating procedures as well, which would make them more usable than helipads. So I'm not overly fussed about the design standards. I think they are in a state of flux, and they really are just guidelines. And the reality is, nobody's out there spending hundreds of millions of dollars building out the networks yet, because it's too soon. We don't even have the aircraft yet. So I'm happy to be patient, and the two things that I'm working on, which are also the two challenges, I think, which the industry faces, and which I think all the vertiport companies should be working on around the world. There's two things that we can do which are useful, and the first one of those is to connect with the community to get the community license on board, to explain to them, the community, how this is going to affect their lives, and how it's going to be not as big an impost as helicopters might be on amenity, and what the benefits might be, and get that community support on board, and that hasn't really happened yet. Generally, people don't like drones, they don't like helicopters, so we've got a lot of work to do. The next thing that I think we should all be doing is educating our decision makers. So I'm an ex-deputy mayor and member of parliament in Victoria, and so I know the political systems well, and politicians need to be shown that this is a good news story. It's not something which will cause the community to turn against them, and quite the opposite. We want the community to be telling the politicians, this is what we want, why can't you make it happen? So what we want to see is that the rules and regulations change so that we can actually establish vertiports in locations where helipads might not be available at the moment, and that will depend on the community accepting them, and being safer, aircraft being safer than other forms of transport, and also that the noise being kept to a minimum. So that's one area which is a big challenge, which I think is huge for the whole industry, and everybody will benefit. And in every country, that's what anybody working in this industry should be doing, is talking to your local politicians. From a business perspective, because that's all very well and good doing all that work for the benefit of the whole community, but from a business perspective with Skyports, what we're doing is creating a database of property sites, of property owners who are interested in hosting vertiports. And that's a really big challenge, because the property industry has not jumped at this. They're starting to sniff the breeze now and realise this could be big. And there are many, many opportunities for the property industry, but they need to be educated. And what we've done with Skyports in Australia is made it very simple. We don't charge them, but they can simply go on our website and plug in a location, and that will come up on the map as one of our sites that we have access to the owners to talk to about a future deal. And we've recently opened up that collector of information to the whole world. So anyone in the world could put in their property and be represented by Skyports. And we expect that in the future, when the big investment comes, when those rules and regulations change, and the big investment comes to build out networks, Skyports will be in a position that we can actually provide that information and those relationships with sites where vertiports can be built. So they're the two challenges which I'm working on and which I think everybody should be working on, because I think the focus on building vertiports at the moment is there are some benefits to it, but a lot of money is being spent on building prototypes, and I think there's more useful ways to direct our efforts at this stage.
Thank you, Clem. It's a very important point, and I think the industry is now an emerging market, and we have to connect all the stakeholders, not just the public, but the manufacturers and the operators, the regulators, and see what we can do better for see the implementation in the next years. So I think it's important, and not just one implementation, but a sustainable one, where we can see this new mean of transportation integrated with other means of transportation we already have, we already know. So now, from the perspective of an eVTOL aircraft manufacturer, I want to invite Borna to talk about the strategies that Vertical Aerospace has been adopting, thinking about the development of products that can operate in different regions, different continents, serving different markets. And in this context, if there is any region that, in your opinion, stands out in terms of positive public acceptance, if we have this for eVTOLs.
Thanks, Veruska. Yeah, Vertical Aerospace, we're pioneering electric aviation. The VX4, our aircraft that we're developing, is a piloted aircraft with space, comfortable space for up to 4 passengers. And when we consider the strategy for how do we open the greatest possible market, it's quite simple. We're talking about it needs to be safer, cleaner, and quieter. With those 3 key elements, we believe we'll be able to open the widest possible market around the globe. How well are we doing? Well, today, if you look at our pre-order book, we have 1,400 aircraft, including customers such as Avalon, the world's 2nd largest aircraft leasing company, with up to 500 aircraft, an impressive order for up to 350 aircraft from American Airlines, and they've even made commitments for deposits for the first 50 aircraft. And I suppose specific to this region, Veruska, we're very proud to have Iberojet on board for up to 100 aircraft. And I think this is a great vote of confidence about how well we are working on executing on that strategy. If we look at, first of all, safety, that's really key in this industry. Not only will we be doing inter-regional flights, but in terms of the urban environment, safety is key. So we're working to EASA's SC VTOL requirements. We believe these are the most stringent requirements today that have been published. And we welcome that, because our aircraft must be safe. And that's why we're aiming for that safety level equivalent to a commercial airliner, not the case with all of the regulatory requirements. The aircraft will be certified to UK CAA requirements, concurrently as well with EASA. And the aircraft will be piloted. I think that's key. That's how we believe this industry will take off. If you look at other aspects in terms of safety, well, our aircraft architecture in its design has a high level of redundancy. We must have that. Secondly, if we look in terms of the aircraft being cleaner, it's an all-electric aircraft. So in terms of operating emissions, there will be 0 operating emissions. And that's really what's so exciting about this industry. I come from the jet background, and I'm very proud to be working at Vertical, really developing a more sustainable future for this industry and for mobility. If we look at opening the largest possible markets, this aircraft needs to be exceptionally quiet. So the VX4, we're targeting less than 50 decibels in cruise and exceptionally quiet as well in takeoff. And that's key because in terms of public acceptance, this aircraft really must be exceptionally quiet in order to gain access to as many possible markets around the world. How are we going to achieve that? Well, specific to the propeller design, we're keeping that in-house. It's such a critical component, and just the other week we completed our first tethered hover of the test aircraft, the prototype. And it's not just a case of what the noise level is in terms of pure decibels. It's also the type of sound that these aircraft are going to produce. I'm very pleased at Vertical that the VX4, the sound, that profile that we've heard with our own ears, isn't that of a higher pitched drone, which some people find annoying, nor is it the lower level buffeting of what people experience with helicopters. It's something in between. It's something which our flight test team have described as pleasant. And I think that bodes very well for the future of this industry. When we look at acceptance of this aircraft in different markets, I think there was a very good study by EASA published in May this year. And for the European countries, they did a complete survey, and the initial findings have been extremely positive. As long as there's common benefit for the citizens of the EU. And I think that's where the operational economics of the VX4 is so critical. We're targeting a cost per seat mile of between $1 to $2. And what that means is everyone eventually will be able to fly on the VX4. This isn't for the super rich. This is really democratizing electric urban air mobility, advanced air mobility for the wider population. And if it's accessible to people, there will be interest for them. Key aspects that I mentioned, noise, safety, are elements in the finding which they expressed concerns about, but still very open to see how these products perform. So on balance, the easiest markets to open in terms of acceptance, I would say, are markets where helicopters are already flying today, because they will see an immediate benefit in terms of a much lower nose profile, and they will welcome that. So we've partnered and have secured orders with GOL. So cities such as Sao Paulo, they have over 500 heliports today. It's going to make a tremendous benefit in terms of lowering the noise profile in cities such as that and elsewhere around the world. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Borna. Now I would like to create a discussion between us on the topic investments and funding. As we spoke before, most part of this market involves startups and small companies, and we know, working with advanced air mobility, that the new regulation impacted the scenario. Now we have a feeling about this last year different of the feeling when it starts before 2021. So I invite you to comment about this as operator, as manufacturer, and contributing with your U-space and or grounding infrastructures. What is the outlook for the future, and what is your feeling now about this impact? When to start?
Yeah. I think that goes up and down, and regulators have a big paper on that, big position on that. So initially we have a big boom on drones. Every investor wants to be there. There is a lot of money because it has a lot of potential and it could do a lot of things. But then come regulators and, okay, you can do nothing. For example, in Europe, we and a few other operators were flying. We have contracts. We are starting to help laboratories, hospitals, pharmacies, and then they ask us, say, okay, no one can fly. And we starting really small operations, allow some things, but mostly stopping everything. And then the investors, okay, I will not put money on that. And then the very low investment. Now it's the difference is there is to be this difference in the investor and in the companies, and I think the investors are realizing that. Need to be really smart money. So you cannot, because of the regulators, you cannot say, I will throw a lot of millions and we'll grow really fast. That's not possible because the regulators just don't allow that. What you need to be, and the investors are realizing, need to be companies that will move slow, because we need to move slow, we cannot, but companies that are moving smartly, that are not spending a lot of money in the technology, because we have the technology is there. Of course, there is a lot to develop, and we will for sure develop, and we want to develop, but it's now companies that can survive without selling for more long, but is developing, is winning terrain, is building the trust, is working with the procedures, working with the regulators and get this approval, and this approval step by step. But that happens to the companies and to the smart investors. The ones that really do that smartly and slowly and stay on the market will get the market first. And that of course everyone knows that is a several billions market for any of these cases, for operators, for this infrastructure, to the vertiports, to the air transportation itself, for the use space, because that's of course that will change everything. So I think that's the difference. Investors are getting again more cautious about, but of course they will lose money if they don't invest, because the future is there. Everyone knows. Need to be well spent, not to rush what the investors are used to, because usually they invest in apps. And you just go there and put millions of people using that app and got a lot of money in 5 years. And that's with us, because it's hardware, because it's aviation, because it's regulated. You don't do really fast in 5 years. We started 7 years ago, and we had big hopes to grow that fast, and that's not the truth. But we are going steadily and winning the trust of the regulators and get procedures and change the market, and that's the way to go.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can echo what Eduardo is saying. We have been seeing the same thing. We did an investment about 4 years ago, and then it was quite easy to get investment money. Everybody still believed in the hockey stick within the drone industry. Now it's a lot more difficult. We had planned to do a C round last year. In the end, because of the economic situation with COVID at that time, but also the drone industry not picking up to the level where we thought it was going to be, we decided to go for a B+ round. And we were fortunate that one of the existing investors shares our long-time conservative vision that it will take another 2 to 3 years before the industry will take off. So we're fortunate that we have enough investment money to bridge the next 2 to 3 years. What will happen after those 2 to 3 years, I think, will heavily depend on what will happen with the industry. I think if it remains like this, then it's going to be as difficult for drone operators to get operational approvals as it is right now. The industry will not pick up, and it will be very hard to find new investors. And for companies like us, the revenue is not there yet that we would expect from commercial contracts. So we need to be able to unlock the lock that's currently is there on the operational authorizations to facilitate those. And I think the big challenge is, on the one hand, we're talking about people within the aviation industry that have been there for years, who are very risk averse, towards startups and scale-ups like here that have the vision, let's try, fail, learn, and try again. And those things don't match. And I think we need to find a way to come closer together, find a middle ground which is acceptable for the aviation industry and which is acceptable for companies like ours, and then move forward from there, and then unlock the potential that is there for this industry.
Okay, thank you. Borna, you want?
Yeah, if you look at the eVTOL space, Vertical Aerospace floated last year on the New York Stock Exchange. I think last year was an especially busy time in terms of funding. Collectively, I believe there was around $10 billion put into the industry. And we set the expectations very high, and we need to maintain that trust with investors. I think they understand the tremendous potential of this market. There's been numerous studies, but we're talking about a market size of $1 trillion in the not too distant future. That's tremendous. But I think we need to start showing that we are delivering on those promises. The automotive market, they understand how scalable this industry can be, and that's why they're getting involved. We recently saw Hyundai playing a stake in this market, but we need to manage the expectations, and fundamentally we need to deliver on what I said at the beginning. That the VX4 is aiming for: safety, cleanliness, and in terms of a very low noise profile. And when we get that aircraft certified with the right operating economics, the funding will come. Yeah, continue to come.
Thank you. Glenn? I think you are on mute.
So look, as Borna said, the $10 billion has gone into the front-running aircraft, and that's a lot of money, a lot of excitement, and a lot of confidence. But the reality is the returns are unknown. There are so many variables there. The business plan as to how these aircraft are going to operate is really not defined. It's very much dependent on access to new vertiports, to new landing sites for them to be able to fulfill their potential. You may have the best aircraft in the world, but if all you can do is fly from helipads to airports, you're never going to create a revolution in aviation. So the return for investors is largely unknown. I think it's people are very much just acting on a gut feel that this is going to be a revolution, as Bourne says. But there are going to be big winners and big losers in this. Not everybody's going to get through. It's one thing to get an aircraft to fly. It's another thing to get an aircraft to fly commercially. And getting that type certification is hugely expensive. And this is why these companies need the money to get through to that point. The good thing for companies like Skyports is that we don't really mind who the winners are. We know there will be winners, and they're going to need these new landing sites to fulfill their business models and create businesses out of their incredible machines that they're developing. So that's where I'm sort of comfortable in the space that I'm in, and a lot of people ask me, well, what's the business model? How much will I make if I put a vertiport on my building? And the answer is we don't know yet. There's just so many variables, and we don't know how big the pie is, so we can't tell you how big the slice you're going to get is. But clearly there's a strong feeling amongst a lot of people that this is a revolution that's about to happen. All the stars are now aligning, and I think it's clear that that's what we're headed for. As far as raising capital goes, I don't think the vertiport industry needs to be capital intensive at the moment. And again, this is where I differ from many of my global competitors. We raise funds just to pay for consultants, myself and consultants to do the work that we're doing on the regulatory and political angles to change the rules to be able to activate vertiports, and to connect with property owners to get options on their sites. Now, even if I had tens of millions of dollars sitting in the bank, I wouldn't be building vertiports now, because we don't yet know what is required. So the front-running aircraft will guide that, and they're not yet ready to tell us, and the regulators aren't yet ready to tell us definitively either. So from a funding perspective, Skyports is working on a very conservative basis of primarily doing the stuff which we think will be beneficial, and we're confident that when the time is right, when Vertical Aerospace and others have got an aircraft that people want to fly and they want to buy, and they're looking for places to land, that's when the big investment will come to us, because we have got the sites, we've got the regulatory ability to activate them, and we've got networks that we've been doing work on from a concept of operations perspective for many years in the lead up to that happening. So that's where we differ a bit, and so we're not that fussed about the fundraising. We're actually in the middle of a crowd fundraise where we find a lot of young people are very excited about this industry. So we've set up a crowdfunding page, sort of website called Birchall, and we're able to offer equity in our company for, they can put in as little as $500 and own a share of Skyports, and we find that's a great way to raise the small amount of funds that we need to do the work that we're doing. And I'm very hopeful that we've got 400 investors so far. We'll probably have another 1,000 investors in the next few weeks, and I'm really looking forward to hoping that to fulfil their dreams and my dreams, and that we will end up being a very successful company, and all the early investors will be justly rewarded.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point that Clem makes, in terms of when do we start with the infrastructure. From an OEM standpoint, I mean, I've worked in business aviation, and the greatest value that eVTOLs are going to offer the public is saving time. And when you look at some of these Skyports, I mean, they're architectural masterpieces. They truly look spectacular, but they don't have to be capital intensive. That's what we're telling our customers. Passengers want to save time. They want to get to their destination. Of course, the experience needs to be exceptional, but it doesn't need to be capital intensive, I believe.
Okay, thank you. I think we have a lot of important topics. Unfortunately, we have no time today to discuss all of them. We have cybersecurity, we have a lot of other questions for the next year, for the future of this industry. But in my opinion, we discussed here today important points for the future. So we had the vision of operation, also ground infrastructure, and the other important points. And I want to finish this panel asking you for please talk in one word, what will be the hot topic for the next year? In your opinion, one topic selection for the next year as hot point.
I think you mentioned it already. It's going to be cybersecurity. We see this popping up with our existing customers and popping it more and more. We're involved in a couple of European projects as well, really looking into cybersecurity. So I think that's going to be one of the main topics to allow this industry to move forward in the upcoming years.
Thank you.
Delivery, for sure. And I think delivery is the precursor of everything, even delivering people. So I think that's the moment now, and what everyone will start delivery products, and I think that will build the foundation and the trust with regulators and the people that they can fly also in bigger drones.
Yeah, safety. Yeah, we need to, as an industry, collectively continue to gain people's trust that this industry can be developed in a safe way. Only that way can we open up and scale to the potential that it has.
Clem?
Certification, I think, is the most important thing. We need to get an aircraft or two in the air flying commercially so that people can see and hear them and make their own call as to whether they want this to be a ubiquitous form of transport. And at the moment, you know, we're all spruiking this industry, but many of us, you know, have never even seen an eVTOL fly. So I think, you know, what we're really looking for is that you know, those front runners get certified in the time frame that they're saying, and they have all pushed back their time frames over recent years, and I'm hoping that the time frames that are out there will be met, and that within the next year or two we will see the front runners coming online, and I think that's going to be a game changer then. I think a lot of investment will come into the industry at that point, and also support the stragglers as well when people realise, well, actually this is a real thing, and you know, we need to prepare our communities to accept this revolution in transportation.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank you, all of you, and see you next year for sure.